beat, stoned for dead. I mean, God didn't save him from any of that. He just went through it with him. And it applies to our life today. Because we're a Christian doesn't exempt us from people talking bad about us. It doesn't exempt us from trials and tribulations or loss of jobs. You can just fill in the blank. I, like some of you, have sat on the end of a doctor's table and said, you have cancer. That's the awfulest feeling there is in the whole wide world if you've been through it. It's awful. And you have to work through it. But he didn't say that he would keep us from that stuff. He says, I'll go with it through you. And boy, when he does, it's a wonderful thing. Let me tell you, a lot of times when you look back, you find out that it's his footprints and not yours, because he carried you through. And so he's carrying Paul through here. Paul is he's going to take a beating all his life. And God's going to be with him every step of the way. Where did I leave off at? Verse 4. But Festus answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea. Okay, let's move to verse 5. Let them therefore, said he, which among you are able, go down with me and accuse this man, if there be any wickedness in him. And when he had tarried among them more than 10 days, he went down unto Caesarea, and the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, commanded Paul to be brought. And when he was come, the Jews which came down from Jerusalem stood round about and laid many grievous complaints against Paul. And when they could not prove, which they could not prove, while he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, neither against the temple, nor against Caesar, have I offended anything at all. But Festus, willing to do the Jews a pleasure, answered Paul and said, Will thou go up to Jerusalem, and there be judged of these things before me? What I see here in Festus is he's a politician. He's got these Jewish leaders up here. See, none of those guys, all them governors, lived in Caesarea because they did not like Jerusalem. They hated it. Because the Jewish leaders are there. And they are always causing some kind of problem, all the time. And so they live down there, 60 miles away, And so he says, if I take Paul up there, maybe I can earn some favor with these Jewish leaders, and maybe they'll just stay quiet and we'll get along okay. Has that ever worked in any of your lives? No. You can't bargain with Satan. You can never bargain with Satan. It never works out, ever. And so he is just like what we know as politicians, because isn't that what a politician does? He promises. He goes over to this group and he promises them something, and he tries to make them happy, and then he comes to your group and he says, whatever you want to hear, he'll tell you that, and then he'll move on to the next group, and has no intentions of fulfilling any of it. This is Festus. He wants to go to the top. He wants to move on to kingship or whatever the next step up the ladder is. That's his whole aim. He doesn't care about these people. He's just doing what he has to do to go where he has to go, and however it is to get there. And so he says, if I take Paul up there, well, maybe I'll make them guys happy. But Paul knows this. What's the chances of Paul being treated fairly? None. He knows this. They're not going to treat him fairly. They're going to kill him. That's what they've wanted to do all along. They want to kill him. They have a passion. They got as the saying is, they smell blood. They want rid of this man. And if he takes them up there, he will die. There will be no fairness in it at all, period. And so he says, no. And so he asked in 10, he says, and Paul said, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged. To the Jews have I done no wrong, as thou well knowest. And he is a Roman. He has a right to go right before Caesar. And that's what he says. Maybe if there's any chance of getting any kind of fairness, I'll go before Caesar. And so that's where your quarterly stops with that. And then we move on. Check the time up there because it goes so fast. We go on and pick up King Agrippa. This is King Agrippa II. This is Festus' wife's brother, okay? And there's a lot of speculation about Bernice, and I'm not going to go into that, but these three are brothers and two sisters. And he is the king, and he has come into town. And he is checking things out over his kingdomship there that he's over. And Festus is new, and so Festus talks him into coming. He says, I got this guy, and I don't know what to do with him, because basically I can't hardly send him to see Caesar because I can't write a paper saying that he's done anything wrong. I can't. So I want to bring him before you and let you help me make judgment on him, so that when I send him to Caesar, I have documentation that he is guilty of something. Agrippa comes into town. This is a big deal. If the President of the United States would come into town, Greenville, Tuesday, what would Greenville be doing right now? They'd be preparing. Everybody that they had would have a broom in his hand, they'd have a dust rag in his hand, and they'd be shining Greenville up like it hasn't shown maybe ever. I mean, they would, anything that needed painted, they'd paint it. They'd do everything they possibly could to make Greenville shine because the president is here, or he's coming. That's what we do. And so this is with big fanfare. Big fanfare. Everything they can do to prepare for the king, they're doing. It's a big deal, okay? And so this is where we're going to pick it up here. And on the morrow, when Agrippa was come, and Bernice, with great pomp, and that's what that means, big fanfare, big deal, shine her up and make her look nice, was entered into the palace of hearing with the chief captains and principal men of the city. At Festus' command, Paul was brought forth. And Festus said, King Agrippa, and all men which are here present with us, ye see this man, and about whom all the multitude of Jews have dealt with me, both in Jerusalem and also here, crying that he ought not to live any longer. But when I found that he had committed nothing worthy of death, and that he himself had appealed to Augustus, I have determined to send him, of whom I have no certain thing to write upon, my Lord. Wherefore, I have brought him forth before you, and especially before thee, O King Agrippa, that after examination I might have something to write. For it seemeth to me unreasonable to send a prisoner and not withal signify the crimes laid against him. This is what Festus is trying to do. He has nothing against him, but he's trying to please the Jews. And so if he can get him out of his town into Rome, that'd be all good by him, because now I don't have to deal with this situation anymore. And so what they don't realize is they're just fulfilling the prophecy of God. Paul's going to go to Rome, and you know who's going to foot the bill for it? Rome. They are, every inch of the way, because God's the great planner. He knows everything before it ever happens. And so he's taking care of the situation. Paul is going to go to Rome. He's going to witness before Caesar. Next week, the brother's going to bring to you one of the greatest messages that Paul probably ever preached. He is. He's going to preach to Agrippa. You know why he's going to preach him? The way. That's what he's going to preach to him. He never got over the way up until the day that they killed him. And I never have either. Thank you.